wretched old woman do choose to go to the devil. Is that any reason why I should quit my dear faith and go after her? You will think better of this by and by, said his acquaintance. Sit here and rest a while, and when you feel like moving again, there is my staff to help you along. He threw his companion the maple stick and was out of sight as if he had vanished into the deepening gloom. The young man sat a few moments applauding himself greatly, and thinking with how clear a conscience he should meet the minister in his morning walk, and what calm sleep would be his that very night, which was to have been spent so wickedly, but so purely and sweetly now in the arms of faith. Amidst these pleasant meditations, Goodman Brown heard the tramp of horses along the road and deemed it advisable to conceal himself. On came the hoof tramps and the voices of the riders, conversing soberly as they drew near. The mingled sounds appeared to pass along the road within a few yards of the young man's hiding place. Goodman Brown could have sworn were such a thing possible that he recognized the voices of the minister and Deacon Goodman jogging along quietly. While yet within hearing, one of the riders stopped to pluck a switch. Of the two, said the voice like the deacon's, I had rather miss an ordination dinner than tonight's meeting. There is a goodly young woman to be taken into communion. Mighty well, Deacon Goodman, replied the minister. Spur up, or we shall be late. The hoofs clattered again, and the voices passed on through the forest where no church had ever been gathered or solitary Christian prayed. Young Goodman Brown caught hold of a tree for support, looked up to the sky, doubting whether there really was a heaven above him. Yet there was the blue arch, and the stars brightening in it. With heaven above and faith below, I will yet stand firm against the devil, cried Goodman Brown. While he still gazed upward and had lifted his hands to pray, a cloud, though no wind was stirring, hurried across the zenith and hid the brightening stars. Aloft in the air, as if from the depths of the cloud, came a confused sound of voices. The listener fancied that he could distinguish the accents of townspeople, men and women both pious and ungodly. The next moment, so indistinct were the sounds, he doubted whether he had heard aught but the murmur of the old forest. Then came a stronger swell of those familiar tones heard daily in the sunshine in Salem village, but never until now from a cloud of night. There was one voice of a young woman uttering lamentations, yet with an uncertain sorrow, and all the unseen multitude seemed to encourage her onward. Faith! Shouted Goodman Brown in a voice of agony and desperation, and the echoes of the forest mocked him, crying, Faith! Faith! As if bewildered wretches were seeking her all through the wilderness. The cry of grief, rage, and terror was yet piercing the night when the unhappy husband held his breath for a response. There was a scream, drowned immediately in a louder murmur of voices, fading into far-off laughter as the dark clouds swept away, leaving the clear and silent sky above Goodman Brown. But something fluttered lightly down through the air and caught on the branch of the tree. The young man seized it and beheld Pig Goodman. "My faith is gone," cried he. "There is no good on earth. Come, devil, for to thee is this world given." And maddened with despair, so that he laughed long and loud, did Goodman Brown grasp his staff and set off, again, at such a rate that he seemed to fly along the forest path. The road grew wilder and more faintly traced, and vanished at length, leaving him in the heart of the dark wilderness. The whole forest was peopled with frightful sounds, as if all nature were laughing him to scorn. But he was himself the chief horror of the scene, and shrank not from its other horrors. "Ha, ha, ha!" roared Goodman Brown when the wind laughed at him. "Let us hear which will laugh loudest. Come, witch, come, wizard, come, devil himself, and here comes Goodman Brown. You may as well fear him as he feared you." In all truth, through the haunted forest there could be nothing more frightful than Goodman Brown. On he flew among the pines, brandishing his staff with frenzied gestures, now giving vent to horrid blasphemy, now shouting forth such laughter as set all the echoes of the forest laughing like demons around him. Thus sped the demoniac on his course until, quivering among the trees, he saw a red light before him. He paused and heard the swell of what seemed a hymn rolling solemnly from a distance within the weight of many voices. He knew the tune. It was a familiar one in the choir of the village meeting house. The verse died away and was lengthened by a chorus, not of human voices, but of all the sounds of the wilderness pealing in awful harmony together. At one extremity of an open space arose a rock bearing a natural resemblance to an altar or pulpit, and surrounded by 4 blazing pines, their tops aflame, their stems untouched, like candles at an evening meeting. The massive foliage that had overgrown the rock was all on fire, fitfully illuminating the whole field. As the red light arose and fell, a numerous congregation alternately shone forth. then disappeared in shadow. Either the sudden gleams of light flashing over the field bedazzled Goodman Brown, or he recognized a score of the church members from Salem Village. Good old Deacon Goodman had arrived and waited at the skirts of that venerable saint as revered pastor. But irreverently consorting with these reputable and pious people were men of dissolute lives and women of spotted fame. It was strange to see that the good shrank not from the wicked, nor were the sinners abashed by the saints. But where is faith? Thought Goodman Brown, and as hope came into his heart, he trembled. Another verse of the hymn arose, a slow and mournful strain. With the final peal of that dreadful anthem there came a sound, as if every voice of the wilderness were mingling with the voice of guilty man in homage to the Prince of all. Threw up a loftier flame, and at the same moment the fire on the rock shot forth and formed a glowing arch above its base, where now a figure appeared. "Bring forth the converts," cried a voice that echoed through the field and rolled into the forest. At the word, Goodman Brown stepped forth from the shadows of the trees and approached the congregation. He could have sworn that the shape of his own dead father beckoned him to advance. He had no power to resist, even in thought, when the minister and Deacon Gookins seized his arms and led him to the blazing rock. Thither came also the slender form of a veiled female, led between Goody Cloyes and Martha Carrier, who had received the devil's promise to be the queen. And there stood the proselytes beneath the canopy of fire. "Welcome, my children," said the dark figure, "to the communion of your race. Ye have found your nature and your destiny. My children, look behind you." They turned, and in a flashing forth in a sheet of flame, the worshippers were seen. "There," resumed the sable form, "are all whom ye have reverenced from youth. Ye deemed them holier than yourselves, and shrank from your own sin. Yet here they all are in my assembly. And now, my children, look upon each other." They did so, and by the blaze of the torches the wretched man beheld his faith, and the wife her husband trembling before that unhallowed altar. "Lo, there ye stand, my children," said the figure in a deep and solemn tone. "Depending upon one another's hearts, ye had still hoped the virtue were not all a dream. Now are ye undeceived. Evil is the nature of humankind. Evil must be your only happiness. Welcome again, my children, to the communion of your race." There they stood, the only pair, it seemed, who were yet hesitating on the verge of wickedness in this dark world. The husband cast one look at his pale wife, and faith in him. What polluted wretches would the next glance show them to each other, shuddering alike at what they saw? "Faith! Faith!" cried the husband. "Look up to heaven and resist the wicked one." Hardly had he spoken when he found himself amid calm night and solitude, listening to a roar of the wind which died heavily away through the forest. He staggered against the rock and felt it chill and damp, while a hanging twig that had been all on fire besprinkled his cheek with the coldest dew. The next morning, young Goodman Brown came slowly into the street of Salem Village, staring around him like a bewildered man. The good old minister was taking a walk and bestowed a blessing as he passed on Goodman Brown. Goody Cloy stood in the early sunshine, catechizing a little girl who had brought her a pint of morning's milk. Turning the corner by the meeting house, he spied the Hat of Faith with the pink ribbons, gazing anxiously forth and bursting into such joy at sight of him that she skipped along the street and almost kissed her husband before the whole village. But Goodman Brown looked sternly and sadly into her face and passed on without a greeting. Had Goodman Brown fallen asleep in the forest and only dreamed a wild dream of a witch meeting? Be it so, if you will. But alas, it was a dream of evil omen for young Goodman Brown. A stern, a sad, a distrustful, if not desperate man did he become from the night of that fearful dream. Often, waking suddenly at midnight, he shrank from the bosom of faith. And at morning, when the family knelt down at prayer, he scowled and muttered to himself, and gazed sternly at his wife, and turned away. And when he had lived long, and was borne to his grave, followed by faith, an aged woman, and children and grandchildren, a goodly procession, besides neighbors not a few, they carved no hopeful verse upon his tombstone, for his dying hour was blue.